Hey,
Good evening, everybody.
good evening.
Hello, Rabbi. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Glad to see you, or at least reach out into the ether to to behold you in some way. Welcome to our Psalms class. I'm in a much brighter place than I was last time. Last time I was in my car in a dark space, so this is much preferable. I do want to note, as I usually do when before we actually get into the psalm, as far as when the next sessions will take place. We should have no problem doing both the 8th and the 15th next month. So it will be consecutive weeks next month. It'll be the 8th of December as well as the 15th of December, both at 6:30 p.m. Now, the thing to note about the 15th, I will be in Knoxville. And while if people want to come in person to the synagogue, they're welcome to. I know that there may be some reluctance regarding driving at night. So, please feel free to just stay on the Zoom if you like. But I feel that on the 15th, as it will be the second night of Hanukkah, I will be lighting my Chanukiah at the beginning of the class that evening. So you can feel free to join me in that endeavor if you like. And, so just to note that little bit will be included in that session. So the 8th and the 15th are the next times. And then we'll before you know it, it'll be January. So another year come and gone. Let us take a look now at we are on Psalm number 26. Um, and this one is reasonably brief. It's 12 verses. And since I do have everything at my disposal, we should be able to have different people read out loud if you like. So why don't we just get into it? Let me see how I can share this. I do hope that whatever you're doing for Thanksgiving will be something nice. Hope you are with people if you want, or if you want to simply be by yourself, that's okay too. Um, Honestly, there have been years where I've been by myself and it's just been fine. I will be hosting my kids this year and just attempting to avoid salmonella. All right. Okay. So now let's just adjust this a little bit. We're gonna do okay. Um, all right. So we are in the midst of numerous psalms, once again, that are related to David, or at least are attributed to him for better or for worse, whether it makes sense or not. Um, and we're going to start with a we're gonna start something that's um, it's pretty bold to start out. Richard, would you like to do the first couple of verses for you, one and two?
Okay. Psalm 26 of David. Vindicate me, O Eternal One, for I have walked without blame. I have trusted in God, I have not faltered. Probe me, O Eternal One, and try me. Test my heart and mind, for my
Okay.
eyes are on your.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that one's actually the beginning of verse three, which I
Okay.
know is a little hard to catch that. So it's okay. All right. So appreciate it. I mean, it's it's pretty bold. that we start essentially with a command, the command form, this second word of verse 1, shoftani, vindicate me, right? That's the form of that verb is called the command form. Now, am I saying that the narrator is trying to command God to do something? Not necessarily literally, but is there a strong request at the very least? Yes, this is a strong request. Um, you know, vindicate me. Now, what Alter does with that word is that he does translate it more literally, uh, which is judge me, right? Um, and that's what the word shoftani, like you look at the shin, fe, and tet, you have this word, in many places, shoftim are judges, right? So judge me. But the sense from the rest of the verse is indeed, judge me for good, hence the translation of vindicate me, right? Um, Now, what exactly is the why does it start like this? Um, what Alter notes is that even though in the middle of the psalm you're going to get the word todah, which means thanks, right? And so many think that this is a Thanksgiving psalm, not referencing the American holiday, but Thanksgiving as in literally the giving of thanks. Um, so many one would think that this is, at least from that word, that this would be among the Psalms of Thanksgiving, but actually no. Um, because of the way it begins, it is a essentially a statement of uh, God, I am innocent, right? Like it's a statement of um, judge me for good because I have been good, right? And the rest of, verse 1 is essentially, that statement. I've walked without blame. I've trusted in God. I have not faltered, right? In other words, God, I'm good,
At
right?
what at what point in David's life was he saying that he had walked without blame?
I would think pretty early.
Early, yeah.
Unless there is some cognitive dissonance, which, as we know, for many powerful people, will happen from time to time, where people will, in spite of all evidence to the contrary, they will say, "I'm innocent, right? I haven't done anything wrong." So
That's my entire job is parental fitness and parents who are slapped with abuse charges and going, I did nothing wrong. And they
yeah,
truthfully believe it is what's scary.
yeah, yeah. So is this a reliable narrator? We'll never really know if
Well,
this is
if so, your narrator has a lot of chutzpah.
absolutely. Oh, and that chutzpah, really can be, it's a good transition because that chutzpah is, very much shown in this second verse where it's like where it literally says, "Try me," right? Try
Hmm.
me. I mean, what can be, bolder than saying, try me? Now, look, plenty of people who try to pull the wool over other people's eyes will say that in a way to look intimidating or what have you. And, in the hopes of trying to get people to say, oh, wow, well, I guess they mean business. I guess we'd better trust them. Not always the right move. Um, but there's something important about this, which is that this where it says the translations here, test my heart and mind. All right. So in the Hebrew, it's chiliotai v'libi. Now, libi literally does mean my heart. But as I think I've talked about, there really isn't, the idea of the brain isn't really a concept that biblical writers really think about. I mean, that's not really, the idea of the brain controlling our thoughts is not exactly that's not exactly how they think of it. I mean, certainly wisdom is obviously an important thing, but that's the matter of discernment, which again they didn't necessarily think of this organ in our head as being the instrument that provides thought. And if you look at so Alter's translation of this phrase, instead of test my heart and mind, it is burn pure my conscience and my heart. Now, the burning part is from the word sorfa, right? Saraf meaning one of these words, for burning. In other words, like burn pure, meaning, get right into it, if you will. And maybe I'm being a little metaphorical here, but what do we mean by heliotai? Does heliotai mean brain? It doesn't. Literally, heliotai means my kidneys. And so it's saying
Your kishkas.
your kishkas, right? The Yiddish, right? The kid, like, in other words, like, so the seat of our conscience in ancient times were the kidneys, right? It's like, I mean, and not without reason. I mean, that idea hasn't really gone out of its way. It's like, your guts, right? Um, and but yeah, I mean, it's like, in other words, probe, if you will, my kidneys and my heart. All right. Not literally, obviously, but in other words, like get into my what we would say nowadays is my is one's thought process, but really it's like get into the things that make us tick, if you will. So that's essentially what's being said here is that, all right, listen, God, I'm innocent. I am, I'm ready to go, ready to be, and feel free, I'm an open book. At least this is, the talk that is being given. In other words, I'm ready to, yeah, I'm ready to, open myself up if I have to show that I am worthy of positive judgment. So there is a brashness. Now, whether this brashness is justified because the person is just as innocent as he or she claims, whether this is a certain moxie that may be true or may be kind of phony. Again, we don't know, at least not from this, but there is certainly a boldness right off the bat. Um, so it's kind of fun. And now I should mention real quick this um, going back to verse 1 for a moment, the idea of walking without blame, that I have not, the translation we have here is faltered. Alter, who's the more literal translation, that's, it's like I shall not stumble, right? This idea of walking is what is we're going to pick up on at the end. We've talked about the idea that these psalms have an envelope structure. In other words, that the end of the psalm often makes a reference to what's the beginning. And so this idea of um, standing, walking, etc., that will come back. Questions or thoughts at the moment? All right.
It's
So
interesting.
Go ahead.
Sorry, there's a bit of a lag on my end.
You're fine. You're
It's
fine.
interesting because when I teach Latin, they, by 2000 years ago, they really have moved into that spiritual concept of like an animus and the mind behind it. And that's when we start to see that abstraction then of the mind being part of who you are instead. So it's interesting just to see a couple thousand years difference in classical times and how different the representation became.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't know, or certainly don't remember if I have learned it at one point, to what extent was like the dating of the actual writing of the Psalms. As I've said numerous times, we're pretty sure that it wasn't actually King David writing these Psalms. King David is more of a character that somebody has put into the Psalms. And but the sense is that the writing took place a reasonable amount of time after when David would have lived. But even with that, I don't think there's much. I don't remember there being any, much intersection with, let's say, Greek or Roman traditions in terms of that. There are other parts of the Hebrew Bible that are influenced by those civilizations, but I don't remember there being anything in Psalms about that. I could be wrong, but all right.
Was
So
David,
yeah,
wasn't
please.
David he was supposed to be a shepherd, right? And I thought he was just some kind of a musician.
Yeah.
And you think I can speak of country music singers, the ones that have been around for a long time, that they've made up hundreds of songs. So why is it so hard to believe that David couldn't be sitting around watching a bunch of sheep and making up songs and playing his instrument?
Oh, it's not that it's implausible that David may have been a songwriter. It's not that that's implausible. It's just the scholarship, the prevailing opinion of scholarship among biblical scholars will say that based on the dating of the writing that they've determined, it's not at all uh, typical of the writing that would have taken place in David's time. So it's not that it's impossible that the character of David would have been a songwriter. Now, I will say though, as sort of an aside, it may be very entertaining to think of King David as a country music songwriter, which would, of course, invite the question of what happens when you play a psalm backwards. Because as we know, I mean, the classic joke, what happens if you play a country song backwards? You've heard this one, right?
No.
Okay,
No.
what happens if you play a country music song backwards? You get your car back, you get your girl back, you get your dog back, you get your
Oh,
house back, right? Because and please understand, I'm not trying to insult country music whatsoever, but there's this general perception that country music is just somebody singing, my darling done left me and my dog went off
Baby just
and
left me.
yeah, I mean, there's that, and obviously I know that there's way more to country music than that. Although I will acknowledge that in the age of self-driving cars, there's a possibility that not only will your girl and your dog leave you, but your car might also leave you if it's a self-driving car. I mean, who knows? But no, truly, in all seriousness, I mean that's yeah. I mean, but and so that's but you know, one thing I will say, and yes, I know I'm teasing a little bit about country music, but I will say, even though I'm not a country music fan per se, I like, a number of songs, but I wouldn't call myself a country music fan. But one of the things that, there was a very good podcast by Malcolm Gladwell, in which he delved into the lyrics of country music songs, and he found this in just how incredible it is how country music songs are so they deal so directly and movingly about people's emotions in a way that many other genres of music don't really do. That there's something very real and honest about country songs as a whole compared to, let's say, your typical rock and roll, you know, R&B song. So to think of David as a country music lyricist, that could be something I could get behind. So
So correct me if I'm wrong. What I was
yeah,
hearing is that David could have written them plausibly and then they were revised later, but that likely the words used were so far after his time that it's more likely that someone else wrote them.
yeah, it's far more likely. I mean, there's not
Okay.
much, yeah, there's not much of a sense that David had anything to do with this. Um, it's just that the way that David has been depicted over time, the one playing the harp and lyre and things like that, and then of course some of the content of the Psalms saying, "Oh, David sang this when the time that such and such happened."
Well, who said that David wrote them? And then I'm presuming we were talking about the Talmud or somebody just saying that he didn't, but somebody originally said that David wrote these psalms.
Yeah, yeah, and that was, I mean, I think that was the prevailing opinion of, certainly of Talmudic times. It's really modern biblical scholarship, scholarship that's happened in the last 200-300 years that's kind of
Who
broken
said
down.
David wrote it?
Who said, "Oh, a lot of the ancient rabbis, a lot of the ancient
I mean,
rabbis
to
did."
put it in the Torah that says this is Psalms of David. That's him. I guess all of them are it, but somebody said that.
Yeah.
And why does the later people have more authority than whoever said this originally?
Well,
Would it be that the modern philologists are able to go back and kind of do a carbon dating with the language and say, for instance, it would be as if, we were talking about the Medicis and we were trying to claim that they wrote a composition and they said, twerk it, babe. We would say, okay, well that's we have the foresight now, sorry, the hindsight now to say we don't think they used that then.
yeah, yeah. I think that's certainly the case. I mean, I remember actually they I was asked in a class about midrash, about rabbinic legend. I was asked to we were all asked at the beginning of the semester to write an original midrash, and so I wrote a midrash about Abraham having a conversation with somebody the night before he leaves his home to go travel to sacrifice his son, and what must have been going on through his head. And he's talking to a friend about what God has asked him to do. And as I'm doing this dialogue, and in the dialogue, I keep in mind this is a long time ago that I wrote this. I said something like that, where Abraham says, "Yeah, this whole situation feels really whacked out." I don't know why I wrote that, but my professor told me, I no, I don't buy that. I don't buy I don't buy Abraham saying whacked out. And I upon further revision, I certainly agree.
Maybe you could pull it back out and make it into a country music song.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah. I mean, look, there's just been, uh, what's so wonderful about, just about literature in general is that, you can retell so many stories and, put them in settings that are that are completely different and tell a similar story. I mean, like they say that that Star Wars is basically a classic Western that takes place in outer space. They, and you can do that at the same time. I mean, I think one of the most amazing adaptations. I mean, I don't know, I'm not enough of a Shakespeare scholar to know whether this was actually, good, but the if you saw the what was it? Was it Baz Luhrmann who did a version of Romeo and Juliet in the mid 1990s with Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes? Um, they did they did a modern version of Romeo and Juliet. Here's what they did though. They didn't change a word from the play. Same language, but everything was set in modern times. And so for instance, if you look at the trailer, it says, where it says in fair Verona, right? And but the Verona that they're speaking is Verona Beach, California, right? And um and then there's a part I remember where it's like, um where they're threatening to fight. It's like, oh, pull out your dagger, and dagger is the brand name of a handgun that they have. So yes, they're pulling out their dagger. So in other words, they're able to set the whole thing into 1990s America without changing a word of the play. I thought it was at least a magnificent, at the very least, attempt at at adapting something and putting it in a different time, but with sort of the same timeless ideas and messages.
There's
Um,
actually the opposite that
yeah,
is like a Gen Z retelling of Shakespeare, and we did part of it in English as a joke to see what it would sound like today. And it's Gen Z slang and emojis as if the characters are tweeting each other.
yeah, yeah. Oh,
So it's
100%.
like,
Yeah,
Romeo, you on fleek tonight.
yeah, yeah. I mean, no question, no question. I mean, it's I mean, the movie Clueless, which is, I think, a very, very good movie. It was a retelling of the Jane Austen book Emma with a bunch of different parallels, but it wasn't until years after I saw it that it's like, that's based on a Jane Austen novel. Are you kidding me? No, it really was. So, well, Sterling, would you like to read the next few verses? If you could do 3, 4,
Sure.
and 5.
Steadfast love, I have set my course by it. I do not consort with scoundrels or mix with hypocrites. I detest the company of evildoers and do not consort with the wicked. I wash my hands in
Yeah, a little more.
innocence and walk around your altar, O eternal one.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah. So sorry, there may be just a little bit of a gap in what you see on the screen and what I have here. So yeah. But I appreciate it. Um, okay. So all right. Again, this is somebody saying, "Hey, test me, try me. I'm innocent, right? Because um, my eyes are on my like I am." 100% focused, right? And this idea of I have set my course by it. The translation you have is I'm aware of your faithfulness and always walk in your true path. And that is a much more literal way of looking at it, and that's certainly much closer to what Alter has here. And again, you have this idea of walking, right? This notion of walking, right? I am walking in your uh, true path. Um, and if you want to continue to look at this as a kind of a narration of the person walking, you know, as they're walking, it's like lo yashavti imite shav in verse 4, right? I don't uh, consort with scoundrels is the translation. I don't sit with Matei Shav, which is otherwise said that those who are sort of, it says the lying folk. I haven't said with the lying folk. Um, Alter's comment here is the avoidance of the company of the wicked articulated in this verse and the next stands in implicit contrast to enjoying the company of the righteous in the temple ceremony. These two verses approximately correspond to the profession of innocence at the beginning of Psalm 1. I think I mentioned Psalm 1 last class, in which I talked about the idea that, who is the fortunate one? The fortunate one is the one who hangs out with the right people, who hangs out with the righteous and not with the bad people in society. Um, and so I don't consort with scoundrels mixed with hypocrites. I detest the company of evildoers. Don't consort with the wicked, right? I mean, it's just I'm I judge me by the company I keep is part of what is being said here, right? And there is again, I mean, this person who is professing his or her innocence is trying to build the case by saying, okay, whether or not you think that I am, whether or not you believe my words, look at who I'm around. Look at who I spend my time with, and I realize that that's not always the best way to judge the character of a human being, but there are times, at least, where the company you keep is at least an indication of which way you lean in life. And so they're saying, "Hey, I've got good people around me who can who can potentially vouch for me." Um, and then now here's where we have this transition. Verse 6, we have this transition to the conversation of being in a temple, right? And dwelling in the right place. This statement of washing one's hands in innocence, walking around your altar. And so Alter, the scholar, Robert Alter, different guy, um, says that some scholars have conjectured that these words were the text of a temple ceremony in which the celebrant proclaimed his innocence, ritually washing his hands while he marched around the altar. Although the existence of such a ritual is a distinct possibility, one wonders whether the whole conjecture might be an instance of what A. N. Whitehead, in a very different context, called misplaced concreteness. Washing the palms could simply be an apt metaphor for innocence. So, in other words, when, if we say, I wash my, whenever we say things like, I wash my hands of this, it could mean that there was a ritual where people literally washed their hands, and it was a sign of innocence. And there are also those who say that washing one's hands are that I mean, it could be a just a metaphor for it. But I will say, kind of as a maybe in a slight tangent, but if you are familiar with the Jewish custom of hand washing, which takes place in different contexts, but let me relate it directly to the Passover Seder. There are two different times before the meal begins that we wash our hands. The first time we wash our hands and don't say a blessing. The second time we wash our hands and do say a blessing. Why the difference? Well, the first time we're washing our hands is prior to eating a green vegetable. that washing of hands is not for the purpose of making one pure, pure of heart, pure of body, or anything like that. It's mainly to make sure your hands are clean before you eat something. That's what that one is about. And there's no particular blessing for that. However, washing one's hands the second time in the Seder is immediately prior to eating the bread product, obviously not normal bread for Passover, but eating matzah, right? The unleavened bread. And that hand washing, which is done the same way that one washes hands prior to saying the motzi prayer. Let's say you're at a Shabbat or holiday dinner, or you're at synagogue, before eating challah. We wash our hands and we say a blessing at that point, because the sense is that it's not just for our literal bodily cleanliness, it's also for a certain spiritual cleanliness as well. So, the idea that one washes hands to speak of purity, of lack of guilt, whatever it might be, whether this particular verse is actually an example of that, there's a decent chance that this person or this narrator might have been actually doing that very ritual.
And then there's the post-meal fingertip hand washing too, right?
There is, and in some communities, yeah. The which is if you've so they call it Maim Acharonim. Um, I have not been in many places where they've done this, but I've been in a handful of them. No pun intended, I promise. And the idea is that unlike washing hands prior to saying motzi, where you're pouring water all over your hands, the process, at least that I've taken part in, is one where there's just this. It's almost like you take like a thimble size and you sort of put it on your fingertips or something like that. Like it's kind of it's an interesting it's a sort of an interesting idea that they do that. So yeah, there are I will acknowledge that that is not a normal that is not a thing I normally do at my Shabbat table, but it is but there are certainly places and homes that do that indeed.
I don't know if you can see my camera, but a friend bought me this set for my birthday this week.
Okay. I no, I'm not able to see it at the moment, but
Your birthday?
Yes.
Oh, happy birthday. They didn't
Yeah.
put that in the
Thank you.
new news.
I emailed about it today so they could put it for Wednesday.
All right, terrific.
Oh, okay.
All right, well, great. Well, let's so all right, so now we are potentially in the temple, somewhere around the temple. We're not really sure yet, but we have the very fearful combination of verses 7, 8, 9. This is why 6 is so afraid. Gilia, could you read for us 7, 8, 9?
Raising my voice in thanksgiving and telling all your wonders. O Eternal One, I love your temple abode, the dwelling place of your glory. Do not sweep me away with sinners, or snuff out my life with murderers.
Okay. So, um, uh, by the way, this is a through line through a number of these Psalms in the 20s, if you will, right? Psalm 23 talks about this. Psalm 27, which we'll do next time, talks about this. The idea of this desire to be in God's abode, this hope that, and this feeling that the narrator hopes for little more or little less, or I mean, it's their greatest wish to be in God's abode and to be in God's house. So this is certainly a through line through some of the Psalms in grouped in in this part of the book. Now, uh, so again, you're picturing the narrator, essentially, in the temple, shouting out praises, saying, showing appreciation, being incredibly grateful to be at this place. And then you have a somewhat abrupt shift, right? This idea of um, uh, of going into not wanting to be associated with the wrong folk, if you will. So, in a sense, all of this has been leading up to this desire to, or as essentially, like, all this is added up to a um, a hope, an expectation, a plea. I am innocent. Don't lump me in with those who aren't. And what are they? Well, some of the people that they're worried about, some of them are murderers. And then I'll just read verse 10 real quick. Who have schemes at their fingertips and hands full of bribes. Right? Alter comments, the lying folk and evildoers referred to in general terms earlier in the poem are now given criminal specificity. They are murderers, schemers, and bribe takers. The speaker has done well to keep a distance from them. So it's not just that these are, bad people, right? What makes them so bad? They murder, they plot, they accept bribes. That's what makes them so bad. Now, there are times when the narrator talks at great length about enemies, right? And we've had some of this, and we're going to have more of this as we go through Psalms in general. More and more times where it's like the enemies, they're approaching, they're aiming to do this to me, they're aiming to do that to me, they're going to ensnare me, they're going to ridicule me, they're going to humiliate me, any number of things, right? There isn't a sense here, at least that I can detect, that these bad people are coming to get the narrator. At least not in this psalm. They're not saying these bad people are out to get me. It's more that these bad people are, I want to be as far away from them as I can. They're not directly threatening me, but the very fact that they exist is a threat to me if you think that I'm just like them.
Yeah, he's definitely better, sees himself as better than they are.
Right. Right. I often think about a quote. I don't know if it's a if it's if it directly relates to what this is, but I often think about this quote. This was something that one of my high school classmates, that his grandmother would always say. Um, says that a not so smart person makes a mistake and does it again. A smart person makes a mistake and learns from it and doesn't do it again. A brilliant person knows enough not to make the mistake in the first place. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I mean, sure, it's nice to be able to go through one's whole life blameless, but uh, I think it's inevitable that we go through that. Almost all people really go through ups and downs, and maybe that means that just not very many of us are geniuses. I certainly am not. But it's so uh, there is something. You're walking a little bit of a tightrope when you say, I've never been around bad people.
Well, that's different from making a mistake or not making a mistake, being around bad people. A lot of what you're saying reminds me of how I was raised.
Hmm.
Earlier, when you said about you're known by the people you keep company with, and that was one of my mother's quotes. But my father, when I would mess up on a test, he said, you only really understand something when you do it wrong and when you miss it, and then you figure out you learn it when you figure out what you've done wrong, and then you understand it. So you almost, I mean, I always had the sense that in order to understand something, I had to mess up first or get it wrong, and then figure it out, which is sort of what you were saying, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's more that, yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, because look, I think all of us over time, and not to, and I'm not trying to, make vast judgments on the entirety of people's characters, but I would say that most, if not all of us, have spent time around people that you found out later were not people that were good to hang around with. I'm not saying that, that we were all that were you're hanging around bad people, but there comes points where we say to ourselves, I'm probably better to be a little distanced away from a couple of these people. Like there's I need to kind of just keep my distance. And uh, there's sorry, somebody want to say?
No, that was my dog barking. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Look, if he wants to say something, it's okay. No, no, it's all good. So uh, it's you're right. I mean, it's very difficult to walk through life without encountering people who will make, who we decide a little bit later, yeah, maybe it's not such a good idea to be around this person so much, maybe it's a good idea just to kind of keep a certain distance from them, and that's okay. um I think the problem becomes, do you keep a distance from them once you know that they're up to no good, or do you kind of hang around a little bit, right?
That reminds me perfectly of the, have you ever seen Judge Judy, Rabbi?
A couple times, sure. Yeah.
She would give the moldy blueberry story that, if you go to the grocery store and one of the blueberries is moldy, you don't buy it because the next morning they'll all be moldy.
Mm. Right. Right. And which I would say is a contrast to the conversations about bad apples, right? They say every group is going to have a bad apple, right? Well, the bad apple's not going to necessarily, affect all the other apples. But yeah, but the moldy blueberry, sure. Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, and because I always like making, relating things to baseball, there is so Casey Stengel, the legendary manager of the Yankees, I mean, who had like 1,000 famous quotes, but one of them was, um, you know, 25 guys on a team, 10 are going to love you, 10 are going to hate you. The trick to surviving is to keep the 10 guys that hate you away from the 5 people who are undecided. Because that's the challenge. So all right. Well, why don't we, as we get close to winding up, Mary Linda, could you take us just the last couple of verses?
Um, let's see. Give me the verse numbers are so faint I can't see them. Give me the
All right.
starting word.
So the but is the
Okay, but I walk without blame. Redeem me. Have mercy on me. My feet are on level ground. In assemblies, I will bless God. Of
okay.
day. Okay,
Oh,
yeah,
and then that's it. That's it. Yeah,
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Thank you.
I see. Yeah,
No, all good, all good. So again, we have this idea of walking, right? In verse 11. Remember, I told you that the walking will come back, right?
yeah.
Um,
And
and
the without blame comes back because he starts out blameless.
exactly, exactly. And then the part about, my feet are on level ground. Now, one part that I find just a little puzzling is the part um where in verse 11, and Alter doesn't have a like anything about this, but um where it says redeem me. Okay, if the narrator is so good at staying away from evil, and if the narrator is really really skilled at at being innocent, then why do they need redemption?
Maybe he has a little bit of doubt that he is always good, 100%.
Sure, sure. And look, and I think I mean, it would make sense for any of us to not have complete confidence that we're always above board, but it it is a shift from the, dare I say, brashness found at the beginning of the psalm, right? In other words, beginning of the psalm, it's like, hey, I'm innocent. Check me, right? Try me. I'm I'm clean. And then at the end you're saying redeem me. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but or maybe the narrator at some point is just saying, I'm not saying I'm perfect, right? Maybe that's part of what's being said. Like, okay, well, I know I'm not perfect, so I aim for redemption.
Does that show self-doubt?
I wonder whether that's a little bit of self-doubt sort of, slipping through, if you will. And maybe, in the course of this conversation, maybe a little bit of the self-doubt that, you know, mo that most of us have, most, if not all of us have, um, maybe that's where he or she's allowing it to crack just a little bit. A little, like they're showing a little bit of their of the doubt that goes along with their incredible confidence.
Couldn't it be this? Was I'm going to say David the shepherd starts singing this or saying this. He's saying, "Look, God, I'm a good person," and starts talking about that. But then when he gets closer to the end of this song, he's thinking, "Well, I'm not always been perfect, but I am now. I'm doing right now, but I'm not saying I've always done perfect.
Sure. And no, and that and look, and that's certainly fair. And I mean, I think, when one is, looking for redemption, um, uh, to be really, if you're looking for somebody to be kind, take it easy on you, if you will, you are probably better off um, saying, "Hey, I'm not perfect, but who is, right? But at least I am entitled to X, Y, and Z." Um, and in many ways, I guess that does make what someone in that position, that person might sound a little more palatable. Because if you walk around saying, I'm always amazing, I'm always, innocent. Okay, well, the problem with that is that the moment, if you say that you're so amazing at it, the moment that you say something that people discover that is not perfect about you, all of a sudden that image is punctured, right? Um, that's the risk you run when you uh, make lofty claims about yourself. Um, so anyway, so that's yeah, so that's unless anybody's got anything else.
Mine says something different. It says, "But as for me, I will walk in mine integrity, redeem me, and be gracious unto me."
Is that okay, so that's that, and that's verse 11 in yours.
Yeah.
Um
It's,
yeah, it's I mean, I think that's pretty similar. Say it again if you would, Linda.
and as for me, I will walk in mine integrity, redeem me, and be gracious unto me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little
There's no explanation for it either.
yeah, I mean, I think it's uh, I think what's slightly different about that and the translation you see on the screen is that, when it says, the translation for the first part is, I walk without blame. And, um, uh, but to say like I walk with integrity is, more like it's phrased in the positive as opposed to, I walk without the negative. So yeah, so I think that's a perfectly valid translation as well. So, all right. Well, good. I appreciate it, everybody. And once again, we will do this again on December 8th and then December 15th. Wishing everybody a lovely Thanksgiving, however you observe.
Thank
And
you.
may all your wishbone wishes come true. If you get the wishbone, and looking forward to seeing everybody soon.
All
Thank
right.
you. Happy
Thank you very
Thanksgiving.
much. Happy
Happy
Thanksgiving to everybody.
Thanksgiving.
All right, be well.